Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Captain's Academy. Today I have for you the Acclamator 4 Star Destroyer. Inspired by the Star Wars design, with some reimagining, including the bridge, various other features about the ship, we have introduced to Imperion something of a beast. With a wide range of modability, the build spawns in as a heavy carrier, you could say armored carrier, very pricey in regards of steel, titanium, xeno. However, it can fulfill a combat role if the player so chooses. One of its configurations is as a faction flagship, utilizing two changes that Elion did recently, one of which is the change to thrusters. This allows thrusters of any placement, could be even just one simple thruster here, could push a conceivably, what are we looking at here? 108 kilotons at the moment. It's dry weight. So you could potentially just have one thruster. Now, this is in space. If you have it in space, you should be able to reach top speed, regardless of thruster configuration. So, with that in mind, this allows the player to reconfigure CPU to other things. However, you could get some decent performance out of it if, within the scope of Reforging 2, you commit to doing like antimatter thrusters. At which point, if you do, you're talking maybe wanting to reconfigure it as a proper dreadnought. Yeah, you'll want to be looking at doing some of your antimatter thruster placements, particularly up at front. You have a various configurations here, top, bottom, lift here, and of course your strafe right here. That should be your primary investment if you configure it as a proper dreadnought. So that way that'll give you your best response to your yaw and pitch. Now there are other placements. This would enhance your roll if you contribute to that. Now, as well as that, we do have some lift and down thrust in the tail, which should contribute a little bit better to like the pitch. So, starting in, this is quite a behemoth. It's very pricey, a lot of steel. If you're ever wondering what you can do with steel plates, well, something like this would be one heck of an investment. Reforging 2 costs, it's quite a bit, 600,000. Again, going back to the earlier concept, kind of like you can think of it like a faction flagship, right? So maybe you have a couple mates on multiplayer, and once you have something like that going on, dividing the cost between 3, 4, 5 people, maybe even up to 7 people, shouldn't be so bad at that point. It does have crew quarters for up to 7 people. You're talking private quarters, dedicated storage, refrigerator, seating for each of the 7 people. You could potentially add more. There is an abundance of space. Again, so what I was talking about earlier is 2 of the changes, one of which was the thrusters on one over, the other one being the change that Elion did with the seating. So now, at this point, if you save a private seat for yourself, you get in, you log out, you log back in. If nobody else has gotten into that seat, you'll be updated with the location of the build. And that works even if the ship has changed playfield. So previously that wasn't a thing. So that kind of birthed the idea of maybe like a faction flagship. Because with a lot of multiplayer servers, playing within faction, it's kind of like everybody's got their own capital ship type thing going on. So I guess I was kind of imagining what would a playthrough be like if everybody could work out of one vehicle, and then what would that one vehicle look like? And well, this is kind of what came out of it. That's quite an extensive hangar here for placement of CVs inside, right? So if you can think like some of the module systems, like say for example Helios, So potentially like a Janus, you can fit a number of them inside of it. So talking like 5, maybe 6 of those modules. So potentially you could have each person having that, and then of course whatever doesn't fit on the inside can fit on the outside, right? So this does operate as a landing deck for some larger CVs, combat vessels, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like it comes across as wanting to do too much or too many roles. Now you can focus on more towards one thing. So the other thing to mention, though, however, is it does come in. Now, it may be a quite expensive materials cost, but as far as like the CPU, this thing comes in as a Core 9, okay? And if we're looking at the statistics here, you go back to main. This is just with a basic shield generator right here. This is 130,000 shield. So think of the CPU freed up if you don't need to invest in shields. If you're just operating as like a carrier system, or maybe just like a faction flagship, you know, just flying around, draining resources and then moving on to the next system, you really don't have to contribute to that. You're being afforded a lot of protection just with the shield value being provided by the block density. Now, granted, if you wanted to do like a proper dreadnought roll, you could invest more CPU towards shield extenders and stuff like that. And then, depending on how you configure it, you could be looking at like 300,000 shield. And that's quite substantial. Now, it's kind of sluggish again. If you want to reconfigure it as a dreadnought, you want to commit to some of these forward thrust replacements. You know, you're talking antimatter drives, or at least plasma if you can't, before you really start feeling the changes as far as its agility. Otherwise, some of the vehicles you're trying to chase down the OPVs and stuff like that might be a little too much to handle. In which case, if you know you're not in a position to do that, as far as like combat OPVs and stuff like that, until you've got your thrusters upgraded, it actually does operate as quite a sledgehammer against like some of the fixed positions, like the space bases and stuff. You could be thinking like the drone bases, you know, some of the Xerax placements and stuff like that. Just to get you up and running, it really could work as a proper sledgehammer and say like drone space, or for example, if you want to start farming your drone parts. So, yeah, again, the other thing is, you know, maintain your thrusters or upgrade your thrusters rather if you're looking at configuring it to a sort of like dreadnought. And again, we do have a lot of thruster upgrade positions. You know, something like here for reverse, that's going to be important. But, you know, if you're not worried about that, you just want to use it as a character, or I'm sorry, a carrier, or as a, you know, kind of like a flagship, then you really don't need to worry about that. Just you could spawn in with just this basic configuration here. And again, for anybody who doesn't know with the game, you don't have to aim the nose where you're trying to warp to. You just look from an external perspective, and you aim the camera to where you're trying to jump to, and you can jump from, or you can jump with that rather. So it's actually not necessary. Trying to maneuver something like this giant behemoth would be quite ridiculous. Now that's kind of the intro out of the way. This big monster, man. I did do some combat trials with it, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So the nose, we do have a decoy suite here. We got turret and generator here, and of course these thrusters here. These are operating as decoys, so these are going to drop fire. Now, the bulk of this nose right here is going to be combat, Xeno, and up until this point right here, titanium. So this is an extensive amount of the ship being armored. You definitely want to keep your front towards the enemy, right? So, and in any instance where you're taking fire, they're going to want to shoot this center line right here. So if you're in an extended combat, you know, say like against Tavera or something like that, and the center line starts getting chewed, just angle your ship, right? Just angle it a little bit so they they'll have to start chewing up on these little bits right here in order to get to your decoys. And that's kind of it. Now let's actually go over some of our device placements, and there's quite a few of them. So let's actually start with thrusters. Very important here. So again, and also, oh yeah, of course, if you wanted to configure it as like the classical role that it is with the planetary assault craft, you're talking 9 lift thruster placements. The number of those would probably have to be dedicated to antimatter again, if you're trying to lift not only the price here of an astronomical 108 kilotons, but also if you've got some kit on board, some vehicles and like that, maybe you got the cargo fully loaded, then this thing's going to be a monster at that point. So antimatter is going to be a must. Maybe not so much in vanilla. Vanilla's pretty forgiving with that, but that also might be the case in some situations. All right, anyway, so starting out with thrusters, let's take a look here. Okay, so let us start with a strafe thrust. Now we have placement for 4. We've got 2 right here. We have a 3rd placed already, so essentially you just need to place in your last one here. So, oops. That's interesting. Yeah, so that's it. Just one little additional strafe placement. Again, keep in mind, if you have the opportunity to, you want to upgrade these to antimatter as soon as possible to really start filling some returns on agility. Right, so reverse. We're spawning in with actually 4. And then what we can do is we have placement for an additional 2. That's 1 on either side right here. So you could go like that. That'll give you your 6. Again, if that's antimatter, then you're really going to start filling some substantial returns. Reverse is going to be really important depending on how you play this, right? So if you want to do the dip in and dip out, if your shields are low, you want to back up, reverse is going to be important. You can't skip on that. You need to be able to back out of the combat. But if you're staying committed to the fight, you're just trading blocks for gains, then maybe you're okay to skimp out on reverse for the time being. Right, so that's reverse out of the way. Let's go ahead and take a look at our lift and down thrust. So some real easy tells here out on the wings. These are going to be a big impact on your roll ability. So I have a guide here. This is telling you what you need to place. This is going to be like, so that'll be your down thrust right there. And same thing here. Just suggesting your orientation as far as placement. And then, so same thing on the bottom. You just go ahead and go down here, flip this thing. And come on. There we go. All right. Nice. Okay, so that's your wings, right? And like I was mentioning before, we got these placements up here. We already have one placed right there. And once we place that, we have our twin lifts. So now that right there, that's going to give us, what, 8? And of course, we have the tail here. As mentioned, this should help out towards pitch. And there we go. Okay. So that would be your lift. That's 9 right there. If you have that dedicated to antimatter, that you're really going to feel the difference on that. So kind of the same thing mirrored on the top of the ship. So down thrust. Again, you have another placement right here by the tail. These also act as decoys, so if you're getting hit in the backside, they're going to target those. Right, we got these here, and just this last one here up at the nose. Again, this is what you want to prioritize, that if you're you're looking to get some returns on agility. Maybe you save these for later on and, you know, dedicate to your nose first. And that's it. I don't really have placement for any of the smaller thrusters. It's all drive thrusters. It's kind of essential to move this big behemoth. Now, looking at forward thrust, we have the 4 slotted in already. Those are easy tells. These big giant boxes, or sorry, cylinders, these are just kind of deco, right? So not really a serious thing. However, this little one between these 2 big ones right here, this does actually have placement for additional thrusters, right? Okay, so let's take this thing here and boom. Okay. Now actually have to take out this little inner ring, and then that should be our placement right there. So X is your stopping point. Don't go past the X. There it is. You know, maybe a little bit of color, something like that. Actually, there we go. All right, beautiful. Now that blends in, okay? So that'll give you 6, but if you want more, I do have some exposed thruster positions right here. Maybe like that, and then this guy in here. And that could work. So that could be 10, right? Yeah, 5 and 5. So, you know, maybe something like that. If anybody's trying to repurpose this for like Reforged 1, where you can't upgrade the thruster, something like that could work. Because you'd have, maybe at that point, you'd have the ability to move forward. With Reforged 2, yeah, it's the antimatter really is essential. That's no joke. You really feel the gains. Plasma's okay, but you know, once you start slotting in the antimatter, that's really where you start to take off. There is a lot of housing for CPU, so I think the servers with like the extended core stuff, you know, some servers they don't have a cap on CPU, or you know, maybe one particular type of core gets some additional slots or whatever. This could be a good candidate for utilizing that sort of stuff, right? There's a lot of space, and then there's essentially the need for all that CPU, given the weight and the potential for turret placement, if not anything else, which is, if you're using all this real estate here, it's going to exceed, well, I think it was 200. I think it's like 200 turrets or something. I don't know. I lost count. It was quite ridiculous. So, well, okay. So that's our thrusters. Let's go ahead and take a look at our CPU configuration. So we do have a core fortress. CPU is buried. This is our core fortress area. So we're looking at like 2 layers at least of Xeno or some combat steel or something like that, right? And so it's well behind all of these targets. So if you lead the front towards enemy, it would be a while before you start taking damage to your CPU. That being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our placement. So here we are. This is our CPU house. So you can see we already have our Core 9 slotted in already. And let's see what we got here. We got nothing else to place from these little guys, right? So now let's go ahead and look at our quantums. This is an easy tell. Just stand those guys up, and there that is, right? Auxiliary core. 4 of those for your standard Reforged 2 configuration. That's going to slot in the ceiling right there. Okay, so that is everything. Now, again, all of this real estate could be dedicated to any sort of scenario that has additional core placement. Yeah, you could put RTGs, you know, that could be a thing here. And if, you know, if you run out of a placeable spot here, you could rip up these little 45-degree blocks here. And that'll open you up some more dedicated placement if you just want to go ahead and stuff this thing. So, quite a bit. And again, it's all reinforced. 360 degrees. All right, so that's CPU out of the way. Let's go ahead and take a look at our power generation, which is quite substantial. And with some ships, some builds, it's like kind of like a hot potato thing where, you know, maybe you can't place all of the devices at once. You know, maybe you have to kind of like a seat share. Here, if you wanted to, you could fit all of the fusion, which is ridiculous, okay? So I don't know who's going to need that, but it's there if you want it. And if you do manage to place it, that's going to be one hell of a recharge. So, now spawning in, let me show you where we're at. So we're down here. This is our generator house. This is going to be like in the HV hangar area. You just take the central primary turbo lift system, and you take it all the way down, and then here you are. Now what we're looking at, we're spawning in with 3 generators to boot, okay? So what we can do, first of all, if we just want to have 1 fusion, okay? We got this back room here, that's your first placement. So let's say we want to place a second one, then we could remove these. Or, you know, maybe just get them out of the way. You don't need them anymore since you got a fusion. But if you're nuts and you got a lot of CPU and you just want to have one heck of a recharge, you know what? Why not place another one, right? So, if we can get our placement here. Oh, we got to take the light out. I'm sorry. Once we remove the light, then we're in business. Okay. So that is that. That's a pair of fusion. Now you may not even need that, okay? So what I've offered here is I have a number of engineering rooms. Because why not, right? So this is our main engineering where we added in those guys, and then we have 2 auxiliary engineerings, and at the first one we will have additional generator options. So here, if we wanted to, we could place our small fusions. There's a cap of 4 for RE2, so you are able to potentially place all of them. You know, that's quite the power generation. I don't think anybody's gonna be using all of that. So, I mean, if you wanted to, you could just have 1 and you get rid of the big one downstairs, and then you're good to go. Right, so that is your generators. Get that out of the way. And so next thing we're going to be looking at is our turbine systems, which, again, we could fit in anything and everything. So that was this is our auxiliary 1. Okay, also in this here, we do have placement for our turbines, but rather we would want to go up to our second floor here. So we're looking here, this is auxiliary 2, right? So turbine housing, real easy tell. So we have our advanced turbine placement on the top and basic turbine on the bottom here. So go ahead and pop on our symmetry plane, basic turbines, right? So 1, 2, and with symmetry on, that is 4. Okay, so now looking at our advanced here. If we can get a rotation. Or I guess that's good, so these things are so loud. Right? Now as I move to the back, again, another placement there. So should be all 4 of your advanced turbines on the top there. And now we have a double stack for our medium-sized one. Uh-oh. We got some texture issues. Nobody clipped that. Alright, so 1, 2. Okay, there that is. So that placement is accessible from the bottom or from up here, either way. So that's a double stack. And that would conclude all of your turbine. So that's everything. Let's see here. How are we looking on energy? Well, this is planet side. But if you're in space, you should go negative. Maybe not with all of that. 263 kilowatt. That's one heck of a drain with all those fusions. And then it's the thrusters. So, again, part of the almost the necessity for this thing to be in space, so you're not drawing that much energy. Again, with the Core 9 spawn, having some turbines, despite the size of the ship, it does go negative. So, now if you upgrade past that, you know, of course, like any other ship, you're gonna start drawing some stuff. Let me show you this here while we're looking at it. So I showed you that we have the pair of engineerings, right? So your floor 2 of engineering, your auxiliary engineering 2, this is going to be where you got your shield and your warp drive. So if you want to go in here and upgrade these, there it is. Again, this is just a basic, right? So you're looking at 130,000 shield just from the basic, which is pretty crazy. Now, get that out of the way, and let's look at some cargo configurations here. So, within lore, the Acclamator, it was kind of, you know, once the Galactic Republic ended, it was kind of relegated to like a cargo ship. So that's kind of the theme that it spawns in as, but you, the player, you can determine if you want to go out of that role, you know, maybe more towards the traditional role of like the planetary assault, or maybe you just want to reconfigure it as a carrier, or just well, maybe you want to turn it into the dreadnought. So entirely up to you. But now, if you want to do like the transport ship, the cargo transport ship, that is something you can commit to. Now we have a number of placements here. These are all container systems where you could either configure it as a 320, a 640, or it could be two 240s. And I'll show you how we do that. So if we're looking at any one of these systems, which is there is 16, right? Yeah, 16 of them. So let's say we want to do a 320 system. So we would just place our controller here on the blue. Okay, and then of course we have two different tones of gray here. This is to show you what's happening. So you could do like that, and that's a 320 there, which would kind of be like, I guess ideal for vanilla, since that doesn't expand. But again, of course, you know, with RE2 players, you can always turn that into a 640, and you would do that by filling that guy in, and now we're having a look, and there it is, 640, right? That also drops our size class. See? That goes on the 26. Well, actually, the size class went up because of all the device placement. But it does cull when you do that, so it kind of helps the performance if you do fill these in. Keep that in mind. Anyways, so that would be our 640K system if you want to do that. The reason I don't have these in here is such systems, they draw a lot of power. So I wanted to leave this up to you guys. If you wanted to not install these, maybe you have storage on a module system that's in the ship itself. That could be a thing. Would I obviously be preferable if you're just leaving it as a carrier system and you're staying energy negative. Now, okay, so the other thing I mentioned was it could also be a pair of 240s. Now we would accomplish this by just filling up the either the, or actually both the top and the bottom here, and you're going to want to stop where the divider is. Okay, so that would be one system right there. I'm sorry, 256, not 240. Right, so same thing. Now, again, you can't connect the two systems, so you would just do like this. And there you go. So pair of 256s. And you got this gap here, so you could maybe potentially fill it up with steel. So that way you could have a break wall between the two systems. You could have some protection, or heck, maybe you could put some additional cargo boxes in there. If that's what you want to do. So that's kind of the cargo system in a nutshell. And let's move on from that. Somewhat loosely affiliated with cargo is Constructors, of which there are many placements. Again, as a faction flagship, one of the things I wanted to, well, you know, you could think like, if you do have a faction base, there's kind of like tripping over each other about, you know, somebody's using a constructor and you got to stop their production, you know, because you want to craft something real quick. So with these constructor bays, you can see we have quite the production potential. So you could potentially say like, hey, you know, this faction mate has, you know, slot 2, and another one might have slot 3 or something like that. So within that, they could fit a substantial amount of constructor capability there. So let's say like 2 advanced, and then on the top you have like, you know, all these smalls. So that could be one constructor queue. Or if you wanted to, you could do like a pair of universals in there, right? And so we have this area here. This is kind of dedicated towards the up and coming CV furnace, right? So you'll have plenty of real estate there for that, and then around that you could put some small constructors and that sort of thing. So, you know, as I mentioned, you have the capacity for like 7 faction mates here, 6 plus the captain, and then there's kind of like that kind of partitioning as far as like the constructor lanes here. So it could be entirely up to you how you want to configure that. But yes, that is definitely a thing. Constructors, deconstructors, however you want to do it. Let's see here. So let's take a look at our shields. So we're going to be building on the back of a quite substantial 130,000 right out of the gate. I certainly would have loved to have this thing as like a all titanium or combat steel exterior rather than just having it in some spots. But at that point, it would just kind of be ridiculous and not be usable. So I had to sacrifice that in order to keep some functionality with the ship. Now, however, it you know, 130,000 is nothing to shake a stick at, right? It's still substantial, and that's just with a basic shield. So if you come here at the end of the hangar, we do have our shield housing, and with that we can place our array of small, mediums, and larges. If we're looking at our auxiliary house 2 and auxiliary house 3, these are the inner chambers in contrast to the elevator system. This will allow for the smalls. So let's say like that. Actually, let's do a 50-50 there. Okay. So that would fill it up. All right. So you got one chamber there. You got this one. That takes care of that. And here we go. This is our medium shield part. So we do have a divider here for protection. We will have to do a vertical rotation. Okay, just like that. That's one. And then we have a pair here for the outer chambers. Well, I guess we should do like a charger. All right, so that's our 6 there placed. And then last we have the big shields, which is going to be our primary shield house 1 and 2. And with that, we have also another partition area, so we're kind of stopping a chain reaction. So Right, there you go. There's one, and let's say we do a 50-50 here. There's another. So what are we looking at? That's 226, and that's just with a basic shield. So, depending on how you configure that, you can get a little bit more or less. Let's look at a advanced shield and see what that gives us. Not sure how I feel about that model, but it'll just have to do. Okay, so what was that? 226, now we're at 238, right? So if you got the CPU to spend, you know, again on like a extended CPU, you could just throw fusion reactors in there willy-nilly. The fusion reactors give you recharge, at which point you could dedicate a lot of these the shield extenders over to capacity rather than recharge. And that should give you something like around 300k. So not too bad. So while we're in here, let's go ahead and take a look at our drone bay placement for radar and repair console with our repair bay. Okay. So I never do really want to place these, the repair bays, because you never know where people want them. Some people want them inside, some people want them on exterior. Entirely up to you. So here, again, if we want to do an interior placement, this is at the back of the hangar. So looking for this little plus sign denoted there, and that's going to be for boom. Now for the repair console, you could place it any number of locations, but what I like to do is place it somewhere up here with either the shield or the warp. So let's say we do something like that, right? So it'll give us a nice little overview, so we can see what it is we're repairing down there. And that's enough real estate here where if you can actually fit a CV inside of here, which you can, there's a good number of them, should be able to repair on that pad. Now, I guess depending on how tall it is, there might be some obstruction up here, so keep that in mind. Maybe an external placement would be better, but it's entirely up to you. All right, moving on, we have our long-range radar array. I would suggest, again, here in the hangar, like, you have this potential placement here, so you could do like a, let's say you could do something like this, or boom, like that, and then that will free up potentially the rest of this area if you want to put some other devices, or, you know, maybe 6 months down the road, some big giant device gets added to Reforged Eden 2, these little depots here, that'll be open for expansion. So we're looking at this. I would suggest this side because the way the load order works for the spaceship toolbar is it starts from your port side. It starts with the port side devices. So this is the closest thing. Now, if you have weapons that are further out, then those weapons will show up first. But if you have weapons on the inside, right, inside of this here, the radar array, then those will show up second. So let's see if we can have a good idea of that, right? So we don't have any amount of weapons yet, but that's kind of how that system works, and we'll take a look at it. Right, so hydroponics, that's a thing. Teleporter placement. Let's look at our drone bays. This is going to be forward of the hangar area, and this is going to be our bottom section here. This is our, I guess you could say, our SV level. Placement for a pair here. And just like that, there you go. Real easy. Now, pads, I don't really have any dedicated areas, but there's so much real estate, you should be able to figure it out. You know, maybe somewhere back here, or potentially even on top somewhere. You know, this could be a good placement for a pad, possibly, if it's wide enough. Yeah, I think that should be wide enough. You could have one pad there, one pad here. that sort of thing. Okay, so that's our radar. That is our drone bays. And let's go ahead and take a look at our... Well, we don't need that. So hydroponics, right? We do have dedicated hydroponics if you're not going to be committing to a external module. We do have... Okay, so here at our turbo lift, we have our flags for hydroponics, so let's just go ahead and go up. Keep going up the elevator system. I did make this elevator system to be jetpack friendly. So if you get out there in space, which really you should be there, you shouldn't be planet side. You can shoot up these sides without having to suffer the elevator system, which tends to combat people. Anyways, let's go ahead and look at our hydroponics, which is going to be on level 5. Okay. And here we are. Should be really easy to figure out, right? Just add the hydroponics right there. Bada bing, bada boom. Grow light on the ceiling where the X, or I guess the plus sign is. We have our grow lamp somewhere. Let's see, what do we got here? There we are, hydroponics lamp. You know, just like that. Real easy. I have it partitioned up into 2 areas, so I'll let you figure out on how you do that. You know, maybe one of these is pentaxid and the other one is cropped. Something like that. There you go. So that's a pretty respectable run. Now, it's not crazy, but it's substantial. It should be enough to sustain the onboard crew. You're talking 7 people. Should be able to get pretty much every kind of recipe out of there. Right. Okay, so moving up to the bridge, let's take a look at our teleporter placement. We do have a dedicated spot. Where are we? Okay, here's our bridge. Right. So, the thing you need to know is that we have the letter T here. That's going to be where you want to do like the off-ship teleport. Now, Reforged 2 does have a new system where you have like teleport pads, and you can teleport within a ship. So, I mean, that could be any number of placements. So I'm gonna let you determine where you should go with that. Okay, but if we're just talking our standard teleporter, there we go. Right? So place that down, and I already had the sensor in place, so all you need to do is just go over to this guy right here. Go signal logic and teleport signal. And there you go. So now it's only going to activate once you step on it. Real easy. Okay. So I guess last thing we have to look at here is our weapon loadout. And my goodness, does this thing hold quite a few weapons. Right. Now, the thing that makes this the Dreadnought is there's so much real estate here for turrets, you know, whether it's the top or the bottom, right? If, you know, again, if you're playing on a no CPU server or like a extended core placement server, then this may be quite the Dreadnought you're looking for. Right, so first thing is we do have a railgun spot, and that's going to be this little guy right here. So the encasement is protected, and it does set some depth in there, so you know, you're looking at a pretty good, respectable encasement of protection. And so on that, with the whole railgun thing, we do have 2 bridges. So this one here, this is kind of far away to make the use of like railgun sniping. So I have included a forward bridge here, which would be more ideal for your railgun sniping. You know, that kind of tends to be a thing if you're trying to target specific blocks. So the convergence shouldn't be too bad. Now, maybe, you know, rather than that, your vanilla player, you could repurpose this as like lasers or artillery. That could be a thing. And if you're RE2, you want to do mounted weapons. We have a number of slots here, so we have our heavies and our mediums. Let's go ahead and take a look at our mediums first. So you could repurpose these. Now, these could be individual barrels. Let me show you this. Right, so these could be individual barrels if you want to do that. So let's say we take this out, and that could be a placement there. You know, something like that. All right, looks pretty good, actually. Not too bad. So that's one thing. Now let's say rather than that, we want to use some mediums. Okay, let's get rid of this guy, and then we're just going to remove the blocks in between. And there's our mediums. So still looking pretty sharp with the exterior block work there. It looks really good. Yep, not too bad. So you would just continue that system with, you know, these three here on either side. So kind of the same idea for the big ones, right? We're not going to be using the triple barrel though, because that doesn't fit. It's kind of that 5 width. That's just a little too much. I guess you could like delete. Well, let me show you this here. First of all, it's made for the. So these are quads. The other term is heavy, and I forget what the other one was, but not the triple, but the alternative weapon loadout is what you want to do. That's what's going to fit here. So you're just going to remove these blocks. And this and that. And then there it is. Okay. So that's your mounted weapon. You have a little bit of protection here for that weapon encasement. And yeah, not too bad looking. So again, we don't, not really any placement here for the triples. Now, however, if you wanted to, you could like remove this lane right here. Is it a, it's a 2, so yeah. So you're gonna be losing that protection, right? But you know, if you wanted to, maybe you prefer that style for one reason or another. And that option is a, oops, that option is available. Okay. Something like that. We lost the connection there between that cylinder, so it kind of looks maybe a little bit janky, but maybe not too bad. Yeah. That's an option. Would definitely prefer to do the other one. It looks a lot better. And you get that protective encasement. Okay. So, I mean, well, with the like the standard turrets, it's kind of like wherever you want to place, man. I do have some guidelines with some of these, like the little cabinet texture right there. Boom. You know, you could do like that. This is a little, just to give you some ideas. Yeah, look for that little cabinet texture. That's a guide, so that'll give you an idea of how to do a run right there like that. So that's just for that lane. I haven't done it down here on this lower deck, but suffice to say, I mean, it's like at that point, I mean, how many turrets do you need? Well, if you want to put all of them in the game, then I guess you go for it. And you know, you go ahead and figure out how you want to best configure that. But that's kind of, you know, some guideline I have there. Maybe these are more like some of the bigger turrets, you know, say like that. Boom and boom, right? Okay. So you can have the bigger ones there. And those can also go up here. You know, that's a nice little placement. You know, maybe you just want to break with the theme here and just put them wherever. You know, that's a good line of sight. That'll work, right? So now we're starting to shape up into a proper dreadnought, right? Look at this thing. Okay. That's just, well, just kind of like a moderate loadout. What? There it is. Not too bad. I tend to like the EMP cruise missiles, so I'll place those towards the back. Now, the other thing I do have is kind of akin to what you might see on a Victory Class Star Destroyer, which is kind of like, you know, the lore I'm going with here is like, imagine this Acclamator 4. The Galactic Empire took an Acclamator and then they used it as a test bed to test out some concepts for like uh, not only the Imperial one, but also like the Victory Class. So you can imagine if you look at the Victory one, this is actually the crossbar antenna on top of that, and then of course the deflector shields right there. That would go with the Victory one, or I'm sorry, the Imperial one, and the bridge is kind of inspired by the Victory one, as well as a pair of missile launchers. Which, if we look over here on the edge, starting with these symbols right here, denoting where we want to remove blocks. Okay, see where we're going? Just do that. Yep, and now you have placement for missiles. Look at that. So now we kind of have like that Victory 1 flavor with its expansive missile launcher. So look at that. That's not too bad. It looks really good. Very nice. Yep. All right. So I think that's it for all the weapons. You kind of got the idea. Just with the turrets, just place them anywhere. Same thing on the bottom, right? I have a few tails here, you know, something like that with these, well, maybe not those cabinet textures, but I do have some dedicated spots there on those little barbettes, if you will. Okay. And also, if we're looking at the front here, as far as like the decoys, so you can see we have a turret placement there that operates somewhat as a decoy from like the side shots. We do have another placement here if you want to bury this a little bit deeper, right? Or just add to your frontal firepower. And same thing back here. Just, you know, you go along the rim here, you're going to run into a number of placements. So, well, okay, that's all 32, but you kind of get the point here. Just stuff them in those areas there. And so if you have one turret placement here, this would operate as a good decoy from any strafing shot. So you'd have like a sandwich here. You got your turret, you have your thruster there. Maybe not quite a generator, but you got a turret and thruster placement here on your perimeter. So that would work to absorb some shots. Yeah, that's it. So all the weapons, thrusters, turrets, all that good stuff. Let's see what else we have here. No, I guess that's it. Maybe the last thing to look at is I have a number of things on a bridge here, kind of like a guide on how to best take advantage of the build, the Acclamator 4, right? And then on the opposite side, I have a color configuration. Obviously, right here, this will be where the tutorial video goes if you want to link back to that, what you're watching right now. Yep. So 3 colors. Stock Imperial color, which is what it spawns in as. You get a red crimson stripe. If we want to change color here, let's go ahead and highlight just a numerical value. Alt-C. So that way you copy, and then let's go to our color tool here and go to configure. So at the top left, and you hold down shift, left click, you hit paste, and you hit OK, and that locks in your color. And all of a sudden, you know, this is starting to look a little bit familiar, right? It's more of like a Galactic Republic color scheme, right? Not too bad. Adds a little bit of color, and of course we have our next one here. Let's say, rather than doing Empire or Galactic Republic or Rebellion or something like that, let's go ahead and go with something a little bit different. Yeah, look at that. What a beauty. Black Sun Pirates color scheme. How awesome is that? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Captain's Academy. If you liked the video, like it, subscribe. Check out the Patreon link below if you want to see future announcements of early release builds, or, you know, heck, even grab one of the exclusive builds on there. There's quite a few of them at this point. So if you're interested in supporting me, you enjoy this content, check it out. Until next time, Life Force out. Hey folks, if you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a patron today. As a patron, you gain access to exclusive builds not featured on the workshop, early access builds, as well as participate in a number of things, including polls, feedback, comments, suggestions, ideas, or anything you'd like to submit to current and future builds. If any of this appeals to you, please consider becoming a patron today. Link in the pinned comment below. Thank you.